Or should we just do a general one for the Cholim of Klal Yisrael and for the armed forces that they have Hashem's protection?
Amen.
Okay, continuing with tefillin, we're just gonna this short little interlude. It says a question here: why are tefillin bound to the left arm? Okay, actually, I think we did that. Okay, let me just say it again once again. They're bound to the left arm because usually the right side is more chashuv than the left. So that's why tefillin is actually worn on the weaker arm, and it's close to the heart. If you're left-handed, then your weaker arm is your right one, and you must bind your tefillin to that arm. Okay, so based on how you on if you left or right hand. If you I'm not sure how it works if you're ambidextrous. It probably would be the right arm.
Now, if you're ambidextrous, it would be the one closest to your heart.
Oh, still the left. I mean, sorry, the left arm. Okay, yeah. So, okay. Okay, wait a minute. Did I read that properly? If you're left-handed, then your weak arm is the right one. You must bind your tefillin. And okay. And it says another question: why? What does the letter shin on the tefillin for the shal rosh represent or mean? It actually represents God's name, Shakai. When you wear your tefillin, remind you of the verse in Devarim, chapter 28, verse 10, and all the peoples of the earth shall see that Hashem's name is called upon you, and they shall fear you. The numerical value of Shin is also 300, which is the number of days in the year that you put on tefillin. Gee, okay. That's quite interesting. And just one more here. It's quite a long paragraph. I'll just say the intro. Okay, how do I use my tefillin? And first thing is, if you need tefillin, you need to go to a proper sofer, a guy like, let's say in Israel, in Bnei Brak or Meir Sharim or somewhere in Jerusalem. In Joburg, you go to like a guy from Chabad, or you don't go to like the Oriental Plaza and find them on special there, a discount for Ramadan. You don't find them on special there. And you don't buy them in a let's say you go to Israel, you don't just go to any shop. You need to be very careful, because the non-Jews can actually write the klaf. I mean, this is with mezuzahs as well, by the way. One should rather buy it from like Chabad or like a recognized sofer.
Okay, you can't buy it from Chabad if your nusach is not Chabad, because the way they're bounded is different, and I'm not sure if they're halachas.
Oh, yes.
So they do.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, sorry, you're right. Yeah. So if it's Duchas Achari, then yes, okay, correct.
Yeah.
But I was just saying as an example, yeah, from a legitimate source.
You may stay for Shabbos at the Chabad while you're purchasing it in an Ashkenazi place.
Yeah. That's true.
All right, guys, let's get started. Kevin, thank you for that. I learn things every day from you. Appreciate it.
Me too. Yeah.
So now we're learning another challenge to Rav's ruling that despair alone affects acquisition. Rav's taken a bit of a hammering, but he's come back on top form. So for every question, he's come back with a myriad of legitimate answers. So one of the challenges came from the following brisa. If one stole and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays the twofold payment to the original owner, but the second thief pays only the principal alone. Okay, have you absorbed that, or do you want me to repeat the statement? Give it back to me, any of you guys. That'll test if you've absorbed it.
Gavin, you want to go? Or?
No. You go for it, Kevin. Try.
Okay. I absorbed. I heard what you said, but I think you're repeating yourself. It's chazorah, eh?
No, it's not. So I'm going to say.
Okay, the first thief. Okay.
Let me just say
the second thief. Okay.
Guys, I want you to absorb like Huggies nappies, like the advert. Okay. So the Gemara presents another challenge to Rav's ruling that despair alone affects acquisition. They challenge Rav from the following brisa. Listen carefully. If one stole, and then another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays the twofold payment to the original owner, but the second thief pays only the principal alone. Okay. Now, what you've got to bearing in mind here is some of the notes. It didn't make sense until you had a look at it in the original Aramaic, okay? Because the Schottenstein alone in English loses some of its meaning. Why? Because firstly in Shemot chapter 22 verse 6, so, you know, why basically would the second thief pay to the first thief rather than the original owner? Well, the fact of it is that the first thief has to pay the twofold payment to the original owner, okay, when the second thief stole it. Now, the reason that basically in essence, that the second thief would pay the first thief and not the original owner is what, guys? What do you think?
Despair.
Because he started from the first thief.
Yes, and therefore why doesn't it get returned to the original owner, that which he stole?
Because you can't pay the original owner 3 times the amount, you can only pay him twice.
Excellent. Arthur's got the answer correctly. Okay.
Well done, Arthur.
So exactly that. So the second thief pays to the first thief rather than the original owner, but he doesn't pay the kefil payment, because if you look at the kefil payment, that verse in Shemot chapter 22 verse 6, it says, and it was stolen from the house of the man. The house of the man was not the house of the thief, but the original owner who paid for the goods. So therefore, what happens is the second thief doesn't have to pay the twofold payment. If he's stealing from somebody else that stole, he only has to pay the original principal alone. And that being is because apart from that, you're dealing with 2 different opinions here. You've got Geneva, which is theft, is different from a gazlan, somebody that steals. So the second thief remains liable to pay the principal under the law of stealing, okay, where the liability of one who steals from a thief is discussed. So that's according to the one opinion. If you ever look at the words of Gemara, it's actually talking about a gazlan, not a ganef. So what happens there is, you know, that there's no twofold payment for the gazlan, and the person from which he steals from, he pays the principal back. There is another answer which supports Arthur's, which basically he pays the principal to the first thief under the laws of causative damage, grama, direct damage. Because what happens is, when he stole it from the first thief now has had a loss, because originally what he could have done is simply return the stolen article to the original owner in a court date. Now he's cost the first thief, where the first thief is not able to return the article. So now that part would have to be returned in cash to the first thief as compensation. So we say, why compensating? Because it's not a compensation. It was stolen from him, and even though he doesn't acquire it, he still has to pay the penalty amount, which is the same as the theft amount. In other words, he stole something worth 100 zuz, the first thief. So he gets back the 100 zuz from the second thief, and he has to then pay the penalty of 100 zuz to the original owner. So in other words, the 100 zuz that he's paid by the second thief is paid back to him, and then he owes a further 100 zuz. So the original owner is compensated by being paid 2. But the original owner isn't entitled to make a profit, where the first thief has to pay him twofold anyway if he doesn't have the article, and have the original article returned to him. So it's exactly as Arthur said. Well done. Exactly as Arthur said.
Damon, it's starting to sound like damages. Like, you know, the 2 people that damage, the first damager, the second damager. Is there going to be a third thief and a fourth thief as well?
I have no
How's that, the 25-25 or?
I don't know. It's a good question.
I don't know. Why is it done like that?
The reality is, I'm assuming what could happen, it's difficult, because if I was the original owner, a question came up as something that Gavin would probably ask, is that I don't care for that 100 zuz back if I'm getting a 100 zuz penalty. I want my original item back. So what I might do is go to the court as the original owner and ask the courts to make the second thief give me the original article back and make the first thief just give the financial amount equivalent to that first article. Okay. There might be a rule, though, that would be allowed in the court process. That, to me, would make the most amount of sense. Because you're not costing the first thief anyway. Even if he returned the stolen article, if it was before the court date, then there's no penalty. That's fine. But the original thief would never go and admit to it now, because now that penalty has been enforced upon him. You get what I'm saying? By the very fact that he stole it and was stolen from him. Make sense? It's pretty clear, guys.
I just wanted to say earlier is that I don't think any thief should be paying any thief. I think it should all go to the original owner. I don't trust any of these thieves. Just my personal.
No, but the reason being is that
I heard it.
I don't think the court. I don't trust the thieves either. I think in this particular case, you can't trust that if the second thief returned it to the original thief, the original owner would get it back. But we're assuming, as you suggested the other day, that once the original owner registers it's disappeared, at that point, the legal process and investigation begins. So we're not trusting thieves, we're trusting the court to implement justice of returning policies. I agree with Gavin 100%. We don't trust the thieves. And in fact, on what Gavin's saying, I'm saying I don't understand why we just don't make the first thief pay the penalty and the original amount that the owner could have a choice. Does he want the original amount plus the penalty equaling 200 zuz for 100 zuz worth of stolen? Or would he like the original item returned in addition to the 100 zuz penalty? I don't know if the court does give that option. I hope they do. Okay.
And I also would have thought, besides that, that the first thief was liable for. I would have thought. And I know we've covered this already. I would have thought that the first would have been my guess right at the outset. I should have raised it. Is that the first thief should be responsible for both returning the article or the repayment of the equivalent plus the penalty, and let him claim from the second guy. Only once he's made those payments.
Okay, but you see, there's a problem. There's a problem. I'll tell you what it is. Is that if the original thief had a change of heart before it was stolen from him, he could have returned the original article without any sort of penalty. The penalty, a knas, is only payable if witnesses come against you. Since he waited that period of time and subsequently allowed a time period where it could have been stolen from him, he's to blame entirely to a certain extent. Now, as far as your other question is concerned, is why don't we make the first thief sue the second thief as part of the process and get at least the principal portion to the original thief, is because, well, that in fact does happen. You could sue the second thief through that same court trial and say, well, look, I would have loved to have returned the original article as well as the penalty amount. Now I've got to find 200 zuz instead of giving the guy his shocking pottery pot back plus an extra 100 zuz. It would have been cheaper for me. But since the second thief deprived me of that, he must pay to compensate for the principal, because I would have had to have paid that anyway, or the penalty. So the reality is the first thief does lose out, Gavin, because he could have got away with just returning the original article. But now he's actually having to dispense with cash because he waited for it to come to trial where there were witnesses against him. If he came to court before there were witnesses and returned the original article, we wouldn't be in this mess.
But if he wouldn't have stolen it in the first place, he wouldn't be in this mess.
Correct, but there's still an opportunity when one steals it to make good before witnesses come to trial, where there's no penalty that kicks in at that point. Because he didn't come to the party and admit honesty, he's actually the loser when somebody else steals from him, because he now has to pay the penalty plus that original article, the principal. I don't know if the original article is returned to the first thief and then the court makes the first thief, gives him an option to the original and says, would you like your your ceramic pottery back, or would you like the equivalent financial thing apart from the penalty that the first thief pays? Anyway, so we understand how at least the process works. Okay, so again, when one stole and another thief came and stole it from the first thief pays the twofold payment to the original owner, but the second one pays the principal alone. Okay, so there's only one opinion that says that he pays the principal alone to the first thief because he basically caused the direct loss of having to make the first thief pay for that financial amount instead of returning that article. But as Gavin and I said, that the court, if the article is in existence, should give the original owner the choice, which would make the first thief relieved probably, if he chose to return it, and at least give the original owner the satisfaction of not actually losing all the sentimental value in the article. All right, let's go on. So if one stole and then sold the stolen animal, this is a different case, and then another thief came and stole it from the buyer, the first thief pays the fourfold and fivefold payment, and the second thief pays the twofold payment. Okay, so you've got two people. The first thief stole it and then sold it to a legitimate buyer, and then the legitimate buyer had it stolen from him from the second thief. Okay, so the second thief pays the twofold payment to whom? To the buyer, right? Because the buyer is now the new owner. So the change of domain from the thief's domain to the buyer's domain has effected acquisition for the buyer. That's according to Rashi. So when the second thief stole the animal from the buyer, he stole it from the house of the man, the new owner, and he is therefore liable to the twofold payment. My question is, since that person is the original owner, then why doesn't the thief pay the fourfold or fivefold payment like the first thief? Why does he only pay double?
Exactly my question. I have no idea.
Okay, so I thought about it, and I thought there could be two reasons. I'm just guessing. The first reason is that the buyer isn't entitled to make a profit of four or fivefold because he should have done his due diligence and seen this person that sold it to him where he bought it from. So he's not entitled to make as much as the original owner, even though he bought it legitimately. That's number one. The other issue is that the fourfold or fivefold payment only kicks in, if you remember Rabbi Akiva's brisa, when it's sold or slaughtered. At that point, the original buyer hasn't sold, basically it wasn't sold or slaughtered by the second thief yet. It was stolen, but it wasn't then sold to another buyer or slaughtered. So in other words, therefore, the fourfold or fivefold penalty doesn't kick in, because in ox or sheep, it's said only in conjunction with if it's sold or slaughtered. So if there's no sale that takes place by the second thief to sell it to a second buyer, or there's no slaughtering that takes place, in that particular case, there's no four or fivefold penalty because he hasn't sinned repeatedly. Remember that concept of sin repeatedly.
So is the first thief, so you're saying that the first thief is I forgot what I was going to say. Carry on, Damon. It's fine.
So what I was saying is the first thief.
Sorry, Damon.
Just one thing, Kev, one thing. The first thief, if he still has it in his possession, he can return it to the original owner, and then only then he can pay, as far as I know, according to some opinions, twofold. Return the original item, and then pay another lamb or, another sheep or an ox, the equivalent. Okay, so that's the twofold payment. It's only when he's paying cash that the fourfold or fivefold kicks in. And why would he be paying cash? Is because the original article isn't in existence. Either he slaughtered it, so there was a physical change, so it can never return the original article, and therefore because he slaughtered which was not his, which devastated the owner, the fourfold or fivefold penalty kicks in, or he sold it to a buyer, at which point he sinned twice. he sold it and made the first original owner hopeless at getting his item back. And therefore that sinning repeatedly kicks in to where the full 5 payment is in existence. So the only thing I can think of is whoever held by this brisa that the second thief only pays a twofold is agreeing with the fact that the fourfold or fivefold for an ox or sheep only kicks in if it's sold or slaughtered, according to what I can deduce.
But then if it's not sold and slaughtered, is it just a double payment then? Is that what
Yeah, because you've got now an animal that thief can return to the owner. And then remember we learned a rule of saying that if you pay in cash, it's the fourfold or fivefold. But if you've got sheep or ox that are equivalent and you can return the original, then you only have to pay that equivalent as the penalty in a similar animal or cash. But the fact is that cash is often referred to a case where you cannot pay in that animal because it's changed status. Either it's not in existence because you sold it to a buyer, alternatively you slaughtered it and Betsy will be no more as the family pet. So it doesn't help to have Betsy for lamb chops. In other words, when it's a change that cannot be recovered by the original owner, that's when the 4-5-fold penalty kicks in. And even if it's an ox or a sheep, according to some opinions, it would only be a twofold payment. One, you return the original item because it's still intact. And number two, you pay the compensatory, the penalty amount equal to the compensatory amount in cash if you don't have a sheep or ox. But the principle is here, you haven't made it impossible for the original owner to get it back in the state that it was. And therefore, that's what causes the 4-5-fold payment. That's what we learned before. Am I making sense? It's the only way I can answer that question. I might be wrong, guys.
No, I think you've given it a good shot, and I think in all possibility you're right. In all probability, sorry.
Okay, so as we go on, if one stole and then slaughtered the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole the slaughtered carcass from the first thief, the first thief pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment, but the second thief does not pay the 2-fold payment, but only the principal alone. So that's a bit surprising that he would only pay the principal alone. But it's easy when you work it out, because it's one thing if the first thief sold it to a new buyer, then it has possession in terms of domain. So if you want to talk about theft, there's a 2-fold payment only when you when you steal it from the owner. It doesn't have to be the original owner, but the person that bought it. Okay, that's when you've got penalties. As far as how does it work in terms of acquisition, well, we're going to see then, are we talking about after the owner despaired or not? But the reason why the second thief, in the case of slaughtering, only pays the principal back after you want to take a stab at it, like the person took a stab at that sheep or goat.
You mean you're talking about why he pays principal back?
Yeah, and not the 2-fold payment. The second thief.
Because again, the same principle applies. The guy can't benefit.
No.
Okay, I was a stab at it.
Okay.
Anyone else got ideas? You, Damon?
Kev, you want to ask something? Do you want to answer?
You're saying the second thief stole it from the original thief. Why does he only pay the 2-fold payment?
No. So in the first case...
What's the question?
In the first case, we had the second thief that stole it from the buyer. In other words, the first case was a thief that sold it to a buyer, and then the second thief stole it from the... in other words, the first thief stole it from the original owner and then sold it to a buyer. Person that Okay. So in that case, it's obvious why the second thief pays the 2-fold penalty, because it's now got a new owner, and it fits within the pasuk of basically stating that at the end of the day, he stole it from his house, the new owner. So therefore, the penalty kicks in, because that's what the mandate of the pasuk requires. In the second case, I'm virtually giving you the answer, is that somebody slaughtered the animal, the first thief from the original owner. He stole it and slaughtered it, and he's eligible to the fourfold and fivefold payment, same as he was in the beginning when he sold it. But in this case, the second thief is not eligible to pay back anything in the principal. Why?
But I'm a bit lost. How can the second thief even get anything if it was slaughtered by the first thief?
Because he stole the carcass.
Okay.
So in
That's the only thing you could have done.
Yeah. So Betsy was dead, and Betsy was pickled with biltong spice and on the rack. Gus smelt it deliciously and decided to take Betsy home for him and the kids and the wife. So he only has to pay the principal back. Why?
It's because it's a new owner now. It's the whole process starts again.
Okay,
It's
so
not,
no. We're saying in the first case with the buyer, you have to pay the twofold payment because there's a new owner, and that fulfills the pasuk. In the second case, there's no new owner. In other words, it hasn't had a change of domain from the thief to the first buyer. So this is the whole reason why it's a proof against Rav. Rav is saying that a change of, despair effects acquisition. Okay, and therefore, if a despair effects acquisition, and the original owner gave up hope of recovering it, and the first thief obviously stole it, then firstly, why should the first thief pay the 4 or 5-fold payment? Because it's his animal that he's slaughtering. And the second question is that why wouldn't the second thief pay a twofold payment? Because now, because of despair that's kicked in, and the first thief owns it, the second thief should now pay back penalties, because it's now owned through despair. So that's where the problem is coming up with this Bryce against Rav. Okay, let me just read it in its whole, and then it's going to make sense to you. Okay, so I just want you to think about the issue. So if a thief stole and then slaughtered the stolen animal, and then another thief came and stole the slaughtered carcass from the first thief pays the 4-fold or 5-fold payment. Okay, but the second thief does not pay the 2-fold payment, but only the principal alone. So it's easy. If you sold or slaughtered it, the first thief then is known as a habitual sinner, because he can never return that animal to the original owner in that state, and he owes the 4 or 5-fold payment. And we're saying that despair might not have kicked in with the original owner, and even if it did, despair alone, according to many opinions apart from Rav and Rabbah, does not affect acquisition on its own. There has to be, as in the case of a change of domain, like it was when the first thief sold it to a buyer, because the despair of the original owner and a change in location affected the acquisition. In this case, the original thief still has it. So all the second thief has to do is pay the principal. Does that make sense?
So doesn't that it isn't Arthur's answer from earlier that will cover that, because that makes you can't pay more than the 4-fold plus the original. So
no, but it wouldn't for one reason, is that the second thief is paying the principal alone to the first thief. You see, the reason he's only paying the principal alone is he did steal it, and at the time where the first thief slaughtered it, it became his technically. It did become his because there was a physical change. And we learn when there's a physical change, it then becomes the first thief. So why doesn't he pay a penalty? Okay.
Because there's no change here. He stole something that was already dead.
No, but he slaughtered it. But it changed.
You said the first guy slaughtered it.
Correct. But I'm saying the second guy, I'm saying when the first guy slaughtered it, it then became his, because the physical change from him slaughtering the animal affected acquisition. So the question is then, why doesn't despair effect acquisition on its own? Well, in the second case, it's irrelevant because of the despair, not because the slaughtering is a physical change. So we're saying then the second thief, why does he not pay penalties to the first thief? Okay, just something I want you to think about.
Because ownership's taken place, so you should be paying to that. You should be paying penalties. You're right.
Yeah. So if you want to look at Beis Shammai, even though there's a physical change and he does effect acquisition, that effecting of acquisition just means he cannot then make good on the original item by giving it back. He has to keep the carcass and he has to make the fourfold or fivefold payment respectively to the original owner. And the only thing the thief has to do then is pay the principal. And the reason he doesn't have to pay a fourfold or fivefold is because he never slaughtered the animal, the second thief, he only stole it. Hang on, Arthur, the question goes, why doesn't he have to pay twofold? Just hang on, Kev, before we have a joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's a funny once. Okay. Okay,
so what I'm saying, Kev, is that the reason why the second thief doesn't pay a fourfold or fivefold is you only pay it if you steal it and then slaughter or sell it.
Oh, because since it's original state when you start it, it's slaughtered. It's not going to change.
Correct.
Only the first thief. Yeah.
Correct. So but the question then remains is that why does he not pay a penalty of double? Because he did steal it.
Because the other thief can't benefit. I mean, two thieves can't benefit. Okay. So you can't pay back your thief.
The first thief can't benefit. The first thief can't benefit. That's the perfect answer. So that's according to Beis Shammai. You said that you can't benefit from the theft. That's correct. So it's your loss. We don't. Yeah.
And also the other reason why the second thief doesn't pay 4 or 5,000 what is he had to lead the car out of the what's the name and steal it. He just got like you said, the change of the product.
Correct, but then he should still pay the twofold payment technically, because
in the first thief can't benefit.
But that's exactly the answer. Is that because it's not the original owner, he might have taken ownership due to the physical change, but a thief by default can't benefit from sinning. So even though he has the original animal, he's acquired it in the sense that he has to keep the dead slaughtered animal and pay the cash equivalent of penalties, but it's not his, where he can acquire it legally, because he never asked permission from the original owner nor purchased it from the original owner, and therefore is not entitled to he himself receiving any penalties. That's a perfect answer. Aren't you on alert tonight?
Yeah, he's the shopper today. Well done.
So the second thief, sorry, yeah?
Arthur's so sharp that he can slaughter the animal with his hands alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but he...
With his teeth.
But he does his homework with the casio, Kevin.
Exactly.
Kev, what were you going to say?
He's very calculated.